So, welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Patty. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Clean. I am delighted to be here with you.
You're very welcome. So, Patty, tell the listeners about you and your struggle with weight.
Sure. So, starting in my teens, I began gaining and losing anywhere from 50 to 75 pounds. And I did this every 2 years or so for 20 years. And I will say straight away, I'm a fantastic dieter. So, losing the weight was never the issue for me, but I couldn't maintain it. And I really could not figure out why. And it was when I was in my late 30s that I really had an epiphany one day where I thought, if I don't figure out why I keep doing this, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in this endless cycle, gaining and losing weight. And it was at that point that I decided to see a therapist who specialized in eating disorders.
And how has the journey been like for you to get to where you are right now?
So when I started seeing it again, I looked for somebody who specialized in eating disorders, right? Because all I can see is my weight, and my weight's the issue for everything. And when she and I started working together, and we went through my history and, my childhood and all the rest of it, and we landed on my childhood sexual abuse, which I was always aware of my childhood sexual abuse, but I never thought about it. I never dealt with it. It was something that I just pushed so far underground. It was like past history. I moved on, I lived my life, and that was that. Except that's not how trauma works. And so she had said to me, she was like, your weight is just a symptom of your childhood sexual abuse. And until you resolve that, you will always be battling your weight. And it was really at that point where I was like, oh, okay. I mean, and again, I was a very successful dieter, and it wasn't like I didn't try to figure out what my issues were, but I could have had till the end of time, and I was never going to make the connection between the two.
Okay.
And
Wow.
once she and I started working together and really focusing on it, my weight became manageable because she was right. It really was a symptom of something so much bigger.
Okay. So, how long have you kept the weight to where you are right now, your preferred weight?
I have been this weight roughly for 16 years, and I am about 100 pounds lighter from my heaviest. So, which is not to say, and I think there is something about being female, first of all, that I think women are extremely critical about the way they look, and I'm never thin enough, I'm never. So I think that's part and parcel of being female. I really do believe that to be true. So that's still there for me too. I mean, I have plenty of days where I'm like, I could be thinner. Um, but I may still go up or down a few pounds, but I've never regained weight like I had, and that is a beautiful thing. It is. It's a beautiful thing. And I don't know if you've ever struggled with your weight, but I had a closet full of clothes in all different sizes, and it really was just a relief to wake up and know that my clothes would fit me.
Wow, that's nice. Wow.
Now I live in athleisure wear, so it doesn't matter as much, but I used to wear a lot of clothes. Pre-COVID, I used to wear clothes.
So, Patty, you say that we all have secrets. We all do. But sometimes the only way to get where we want is by bringing them to light. Is that what are you talking about right now with your abuse? Is that something that it was secret and then you brought it out to light with your therapist?
Yes, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because I do think that secrets are so corrosive and they poison us from the inside out. And I think when horrible things happen to you, especially to children, first of all, I think there's this belief that it's always your fault. I certainly believed it was my fault, even though I could tell you objectively, of course it wasn't my fault, but I still believed it to be true. And I think children do that all the time about everything. It doesn't matter what's happening to them. They always think it's their fault. And I think when you have something that it's interesting. I had shared with you that I published a book, which is available for free on my website, and it really does detail my therapeutic journey. Um, I felt ruined by what happened to me. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I felt ruined. And, talking to my therapist about my sexual abuse was very, very difficult for me. It was like pulling teeth. I really struggled with it. And I didn't tell any of my friends until I had been in therapy for 3 years. So, I mean, it was really something that I felt like I would die if I exposed my secret. And the problem with that is that the longer you hold a secret, at some point it becomes less about the secret, except less about the secret as it is maintaining the secret.
Mhm.
And and I think that it's a double-edged sword with childhood sexual abuse, because I've come a long way, and I've actually come a really long way over the last few months, because I published my book and I was like, I have to be able to tell people. I mean, the whole goal is that it can help people and give people hope. And I have to be able to say the words out loud, which was still really quite a struggle for me. And one of the things that I found since then is that there is nothing on God's green earth that I think is as shameful as childhood sexual abuse. And it's like, it's such an affront to me and everyone who walks in these shoes, that it's our shame and our blame and our secret to keep. And, it's interesting. Now I feel like I'm on this whole mission to, I want the conversation to be had. And not to go off on this either, but it is so heartbreakingly common that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys are sexually abused. And that should outrage all of us. And the fact that it persists and we do not talk about it, it boggles the mind.
Mhm. There is actually statistics are showing that, as you said, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys, you said?
1 in 5 boys and 1 in 3 girls. Yeah, yeah, no, it's horrible. It's horrible. And the statistics get worse over time.
Yeah.
Um, and there's roughly 42 million Americans have been sexually abused, and almost 29 million have an eating disorder. So these things are so linked.
Crucial. Yeah. Mhm.
And we just don't draw the connections at all. And, mine is very specific to me, and binge eating is very common for people who have been sexually abused as children. And I think part of that is probably that food is so easy to get your hands on, unless you're, unfortunately in a home where you're very food insecure. But for a lot of us, what are you going to do when you're a child? You're not going to start smoking or drinking or using drugs necessarily, but food is right there. And all of it's a way to medicate. And I think, again, if we go back to women, I think
Mhm.
food is a very socially acceptable
Mhm.
way to manage your feelings, and women do it all the time, right? And there's like television show after television, and if you used to watch the Golden Girls, what would they do? They'd get a cheesecake, and they,
It's like comfort food, most
it
women.
is, it is, it's a way to stuff down your feelings, right?
Mhm. So, Patty, you talk about your book. Yeah. What's the name of your book? Oh,
The name of my book is Not That Girl Anymore. I have a copy. I'm gonna just grab it really quick.
okay, sure.
It's called Not That Girl Anymore.
Okay.
And basically what it is it goes through, it starts at the point where I start therapy for
Mhm.
this eating disorder. And while I was so I looked for a therapist who specialized in eating disorders, but it also just so happened that her specialty was EMDR, which I had never heard of. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's called eye movement resensitization and
Okay.
desensitization and reprocessing.
I've never
Yeah,
heard of it.
EMDR. And
Mhm.
basically it's for people who have trauma. And just to kind of simplify it, so if all your thoughts and feelings are kind of like a train on a track, when you have trauma, it's an explosion that blows up the track. And so the whole point is to try and reconnect everything so that, it's no longer just kind of out there in space wreaking havoc.
Mhm.
And while I was working with her, we made a lot of progress. But my impetus to start therapy was that I wanted to find love. And I had felt like I couldn't find love because I was unacceptable, right? Like I was too heavy, I was this, I was that, it was, um, and I lost the weight, and guess what? I still couldn't find love. So, there was my theory. So the longer I was in therapy, the more desperate I became, but also the more open I became. So I worked with my therapist in EMDR. And then after that, I started working with somebody who did chiropractic care, which is basically this whole line of thought and this practice that everything's trapped in the body, and your body, when you have trauma, it's like in a perpetual fight or flight mode. So it's like learning to release that. And I made a lot of progress with him, but I still didn't have the relationship. So then I went to see a sex therapist, which was its own form of hell. But and then I finally went for group therapy for sexual abuse, where I was with other people who had similar experiences to mine. So I had done all of these things just because I was so single-mindedly focused on being able to open myself up to love. And when all was said and done, I did. But it was quite the little journey.
Wow. So where can the listeners get in touch with you? Where can the listeners get a copy of your book? Do you have any speaking engagements? Do you have any resources on your website that the listeners can actually go to and get information?
Yes. So actually my website is the best place to go for everything. And it's Patty Cabot, PATTYCABOT.com. You can download a copy of my book for free, the PDF. And I also have kind of all the podcasts that I do are available from that page as well. And there is also a page on my website that has resources. So for instance, the National Eating Disorders Association is a good one. And for if you have any kind of an eating disorder, and RAIN is a great one for any kind of sexual abuse. So those are good places to start. And also on my website, it does include overviews of all the different kinds of therapies that I tried, which are also in my book. So, and my book really does give pretty detailed accounts of the different therapies I tried and what transpired in them. And I will say that when I started therapy, nobody knew my story. I didn't share it with anybody. I didn't share it with my friends. And EMDR was, again, I went in for help with an eating disorder, and we landed on something I did not expect to land on. And it was something that I was not able to share with anybody. And the whole process was so overwhelming for me that I would go home from my sessions and write down what happened as a way to process it. And I did that for 12 years. And when I finally did get to the other side and I had the relationship, and I thought, I should write a book. I took this journey that I can't imagine many people have taken. Like, no stone was left unturned. And I had all of the actual accounts of what happened. So everything that's in my book really did happen. Conversations happened. And so I think it's for anybody who's curious about any of these kinds of therapies, it'll really give you a bird's eye view of what transpires and what happens.
Do you have any last words for the listeners about being kind and patient with themselves?
I think those are great points. I mean, and patience and kindness are two good things to be. And I think that, we touched on this at the beginning, like it's not your fault. And again, there's a world of difference between understanding something intellectually and understanding it emotionally. But when terrible things happen to us, again, we tend to, our default is it's our fault. And a lot of times I think that's also because nobody's accepting responsibility for what's happened. But I would say, try to tell yourself every day it's not your fault. And even if it was your fault, one of the things I told myself after I'd been in therapy for a long time, because I couldn't let go of the guilt, was I had thought to myself, even if it had been my fault, again, understanding intellectually that it wasn't, even if it had been my fault, I had already done life. I had already spent my entire life castigating myself for what had happened. Like I had done my time. Unfortunately, that's still not a way to really feel it. And I did actually, my group therapist, she had said to me at one point, she was like, there is no substitute for experience. And it's true. And sometimes in life, you got to love God and the universe that they will put things in your path to replicate certain feelings so that you can make the connection. And it's a way to just think, oh, that connects back to that. And now I understand it. So yes, patience is a good thing. And if we're very lucky, we have tomorrow, right? Because not everyone does. So if you have a goal, mine took 12 years. Did I ever in a million years think it would take 12 years? No, but it did. But you know what? Time passed. I'm lucky that way. I was able to get to the end. So whatever your goal is, whether it's to go to night school, whatever your goal is, if you're lucky, time passes and you'll get there.
Wow, nicely said. So Patty, thank you for being on Beauty of Colors podcast.
Thank you so very much. I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Beauty of Colors podcast. We hope you enjoyed the program, and for more information, be sure to visit www.cleannejohnson.com.